Welcome to CHINO I Am, powered by Obvious Table. Here we have connecting conversations with inspiring people who have great testimonies. Today, I have the awesome pleasure of connecting with Sage Gowan. He is a creator, an artist, and a survivor. Without no further ado, Sage, you are just amazing. I love the things that you're doing. I love the work that you do, the artwork that you do. You're so amazing. So let's get into these questions now. Okay, so who is Sage?
Well, it's a big question. Who is Sage? I'm learning a new facet to myself every day. So there's no definitive answer to that. I hope that I continually grow and expand and be in a position to fulfill my purpose that God brought me here to do. So I'm continuously learning. I am an artist. I am, a son. I am a friend. I am an uncle. I am a brother. I'm a creator.
Absolutely. So, I want to know your journey. So, take me to the beginning. How did you first get into art?
Getting into art was interesting. I never thought of it as getting into art as much as I found it to be my solace, salvation. My parents were very young when they had me. Both of them had various issues, different issues. When I was 2, my mom was sent to a commune to get clean, and my dad was in Vietnam and came back kind of messed up, like a lot of people in that era, particularly young black men.
Right.
And so I used to draw and doodle because, I didn't really have my parents. I had 2 amazing grandmothers who loved everything about me.
Right.
And I loved them desperately.
Right.
But, there was always something missing.
Right.
And so art to me was kind of my prayer and meditation. It was kind of like my safe place.
Right.
And I drew, like I said, I drew as a kid. I doodled. I've never been trained, with the exception of high school, with my art teacher Linda Shear in high school. In my early 20s, I kind of got into drugs and alcohol, and I was sent to Maryland. Actually, my mom sent me to Maryland to this rehab. And I left there after 6 months and moved to DC, and I would just doodle. I would go places, the bar or whatever, and just sit there for hours just doodling. And this man who we became friends, he became a mentor of mine, his name is Walter Neal.
Wow.
Saw some of my artwork, and he's an artist, and he took me to the art supply store and bought me $100 worth of art supplies.
Wow.
Paints, and I never painted before. I was always terrified to paint.
Right.
Because, my thing was like, if I mess up, I can't erase,
Right.
So why would I even mess with that?
Right.
And, he brought me some acrylics and watercolors, and I was homeless at the time. I was sleeping on someone's couch, and he dropped me back off at this place, and 30 minutes later I called him, and I remember it vividly. I was watching MTV, and just, in that space or that zone of just like creation, and I felt this sense of freedom and God, that openness of God, that beyond feeling. And called him back, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And it was, my first painting was like 1993, called Blue Solitude. And I was still homeless, and I would just do watercolors, and people, if they liked them, I would sell them for $10 to get some crack or a White Russian.
Right.
In '97, I moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I had stopped painting, period. Like I wasn't doing anything really.
Right.
And I relapsed again, was on the streets again. And I got sober in the early 2000s. And I was sober for 11 years. And but still no creation, no painting, no prayer.
Absolutely.
And then I had this super gnarly relapse in 2000, I want to say it was 2013. That almost killed me. It
Wow.
almost devastated my entire world. But I remember I was out for like a week on this run. And I came home, and I had no more money, I had no more drugs, and I had no more access to either. I just came home with a lot of pain. And this is an apartment where, you know, and it was a beautiful neighborhood. It's still my apartment in LA. And I laid on the floor, and I had these old acrylic paints that were discarded in the corner. And I remember all I had was paint. And I grabbed the paints and I took them to the sink, put water in them, and shook them up, and just laid on the floor and just scratched out this painting. It was a regurgitation of all of that emotion onto this little ripped piece of, it wasn't even a whole canvas. It wasn't even like, it was just like this ripped piece
a little
of
bit,
cloth.
right.
And I was like, just get it in. Like,
I'm going to do that, right? Exactly.
You know, so it was that kind of a situation. And luckily, the people around me at that time understood my pain. And so my apartment was saved for me. I went to move into a sober living. And this is coming right after, my first exhibit was in the end of 2013 at the Santa Monica airport. And I showed my photography. Ironically, I showed my crack series. And then I moved into a sober living in early 2014. And because of my crack series, I was named as one of the 40 black artists to watch in the Griot. And
wow.
You know, and then I'm in this safe space of the sober living environment. And my job, instead of firing me, let me take some time off to heal.
Yes.
My apartment, let me heal. And I'm sitting in this beautiful sober living facility with nothing to do, and I have nothing but time. So I just started painting again. And it became like one right after the other. And you know, I'm not very technological, but I would just post things on Facebook just for giggles.
And then it kind of grew from there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So what was it that made you pick up? Was there a situation or a problem or something that you wanted to escape from, or what was that thing?
You know, I think the picking up is pain. It's a spiritual malady. It's a sickness of the spirit. In any concepts of addiction, I am incomplete here, and I need this to fill me up. Or I am damaged here, and I need this to take me away from even thinking, feeling, acknowledging this pain. And you know, growing up with my parents, with both of them whom had issues with substances. My father far more severe or obvious than my mother, particularly after he won $1 million in '84. That was just all.
Wait, so your dad won $1 million?
The 9 billion people on the planet, the one person who should never have won $1 million
won the $1 million.
That was my dad.
Wow.
First thing he did, a Cadillac Seville, a white on white Cadillac Seville, and then the next thing he did was white on white women. So you know, he just kind of went in. But again, you know, it's all that spiritual malady, that hurt of the spirit, and it comes in so many facets and forms. Trauma is cellular. You know, and when you have all of those mechanisms and you don't have another outlet, another way out. You know, that substance, that sex, that milkshake, that whatever is the only viable escape for you, so you may think. Now there are alternatives, there are various other ways to heal, because that's not healing. My smoking crack didn't heal me.
Could you say that it almost was like, because you said something, I want to go back to, it was pain. So that smoking of crack was almost like you were masking the pain. Also, you know, it sounds to me like, you know, there was a trail of trauma that started even before you picked up, that kind of, you know, help aid to you wanting to escape. And I can really, you know, identify that because I'm in recovery as well. And also, I have, a family or a parent rather that suffers from, abuse, substance abuse, and really not understanding that trail of trauma, really not understanding that it started from way back when. A lot of people don't understand that, and we have to be better about tracing, where our trail of trauma comes from.
Yeah. What I think what people might not understand, and mental wellness is so important. Is particularly I think within the African American community, like we can go to church and scream and holler,
Right.
but I ain't telling nobody my business.
Come on now.
Now you only getting half of the pill.
Huh.
You only taking half the medication.
Right.
You ain't gonna get all the way fixed.
Right. Exactly.
So talking about that, because like I said, if trauma is cellular, it's hereditary.
Exactly.
So we're feeling the stuff from generations we may not even be familiar with.
Right.
So when we come into this place, in this plane, in our presence, then you already have stuff that you're unaware of. And then as this individual evolves and grows, the things that happen when the feelings of abandonment, moving to a commune in my formative years, being introduced to my mother who wasn't in the hospital like I've been told for the last 2 years. Wow. So she left me.
Wow.
And this is a 4-year-old mentality, like, oh, I wasn't valuable enough for you to stay. Living in that commune, which was utopic in most regards, but also being sexually molested in that situation. And not being able to understand or comprehend that, but as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, what was happening to me and why I'm devalued again here.
Right.
Coming out of being taken out of that environment by my mother, who wasn't my primary caretaker, and her husband at the time, and not knowing who these people are who are taking me away from my home and my family. And then being forced in a situation where I come from a commune, put into a Catholic school. And that trauma and the culture shock, and not being able to articulate or understand or comprehend that. So all of this stuff is like it's like a snowball.
Right.
And you keep packing ice on top of that snowball, and next thing you know, you got this big thing, and it's has no other choice but to destroy you.
Absolutely. I want to go back to, because you mentioned that at one point in time in your life you were homeless.
Yeah.
What happened for you to get there? Was it a certain event or?
It was a crack pipe.
Wow.
It was a crack pipe. I had 2 parents who were addicts in various forms. And I grew up the squarest kid. I was a square. Yeah. I was prom king. I was editor of yearbook. I was top 10 percentile in my class. I never touched a drug. If a homeless person walked my way, I would thumb my nose up to him and be like, ew. If a drug addict, I would go, ill. Like, I would be that judgmental. I was that bougie little prick.
Right.
So I was very much against drugs and alcohol. And then when I got to college at FIT, I started going to the clubs and hanging out. And I'm just naturally naive. I'm a relatively intelligent person, but I'm a really stupid person at the same time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I'm like that too.
I get it. And so I'm meeting people who are introducing me to things that I've never done before. And being a Sagittarius, I'm like, shit, I'll try. Excuse me. I was like, I'll try anything once. I met these 2 brothers on the train in Brooklyn. They invited me back to their house, and and I was doing cocaine, a lot of it at that time.
Right.
But I have a family that gave me a basement, which means there are things I couldn't do. I couldn't go beyond this point. Right. So I have some cocaine in my pocket, and it's rude just to whip it out and start doing it.
Right.
So I was like, okay, where's the bathroom? And they had disappeared. And I walked down the hallway, and they're standing in one of the doorways, and they have this little aspirin bottle with a pen sticking out. And I remember this so clearly, like as if it's happening right now. Aluminum foil and cigarette ashes on top. And they were like, we're getting high. Do you get high? And I'm like, oh yeah, I have some coke.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, we could, get it. They were like, do you want to try this? And I said to them, as long as it's not crack, I'll try anything. Fast forward to 3 months later, and at that time I had 3 jobs. I was making very good money. I was young, in early 20s. I was making very good money, and within a year, I had lost 2 of the 3 jobs, my apartment, and everything else. So by the end of that year, almost to a date, July 17th, 1991 to July 17th, 1992, I was sleeping on the streets of New York. And my home was 8th Avenue, and I didn't really venture further south than 32nd Street. I didn't go further north than 48th Street.
Right.
And because people loved me, I would kind of vanish from their lives. And not to say they didn't see me, they saw me. There were situations where a friend of mine, John Vines, who's still a close person, like my brother, he tells me a story that I don't recall because I was so in such an altered state of how he was coming out of work and picked me off of the streets and took me to his home, put me in the shower.
Wow. And
within that year, I became the very person that earlier I would thumb my nose up to.
Right. Wow.
And, but by that point, and my body weight at that time, and from growing up as a kid, and I was 175 pounds.
Right.
By that time, I was 135 pounds. Literally, where I'd be walking down the streets, walking down 8th Avenue, and my pants would fall down.
Wow.
And
so let me ask you a question. So, just kind of getting into the mind and your mental, while you were on the streets, I know it's like a survival thing. What's going through your mind? What are the things that you're trying to think about as you're on the streets?
It's certainly about survival. How am I going to get more money for drugs? One, that's always, for me, that was always the permeating, all right? Because, eating was fine. I had my scams to eat. Like I would sit outside of a McDonald's and I'd see this older black woman with gray hair. She'd come out. I was like, excuse me, ma'am, I'm just thinking about what I'm going to get. What you get? She would say, I got a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. I'd give her a couple of minutes and I'd run into McDonald's like, oh guys, I'm so sorry. My grandmother was just in here. Describe the woman I was just talking to. Gray hair, gray jacket. Some skateboarder knocked her food down. She had a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. And then I was like, and the guy Charlie at the counter was like, oh yeah, I remember. She was so sweet here. Well,
and that's how you ate.
That's how I ate.
Wow.
So my worry was, how am I going to get high? And I needed to get high because I had to do things to get the money that were so degrading to me that I couldn't bear the feeling of what I had just done. So, but it became cyclical. It became a hamster wheel. So you have to prostitute yourself to get $10 to get some crack.
Right.
But then you sit, okay, this. And then that adds on to all the other trauma, even the trauma that existed before I even picked up and used.
The snowball.
The snowball.
Right.
There's that first flake.
Right.
And you keep piling on top of that.
Right.
And so being homeless in a certain way for me wasn't a bad thing. And what I mean by that is it reflected my external situation, reflected how I felt inside spiritually.
Wow.
Like in LA, I would go to Skid Row, and even if I was staying on someone's couch or sleeping on.
Well, what's Skid Row?
Skid Row. Right. Skid Row is a large area in Los Angeles, which has, I believe, the highest concentration of homeless people in the country.
Wow.
So this is like city blocks of a dystopic, tense, trash, pain, depravity, more pain.
Right.
People pushing shopping carts piled in bags and tents and makeshift shanties, block after block after block after block after block. And what's fascinating to me, particularly when I would hang out down there, and like I said, I loved Skid Row. I loved Skid Row. It was the exact replica of my spirit to the smell.
Wow.
Which was rancid.
Wow.
It was rancid. I felt rancid.
Right.
And again, you know, that feeling of ugly and lonely and fat and unloved was the fuel of my addiction. No one ever called me ugly. No one ever called me fat. No one ever called me these things. But I had that first snowflake in that snowball.
And it kept going.
And it kept going and going and going. So like I said, you know, Skid Row was great to me because it was my mate. It was my mirror.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. How did you come out of that? Because, you know, there could be somebody, you know, that's watching our conversation right now, and they're there, and they don't really know how to come out. So what was your journey like coming out of that stage of your life?
I am relatively intelligent. I am, especially then, had a bit of arrogance.
Okay.
And I was very defiant. And I was like, even as bad as it got, like even before I became homeless, there was these homeless people that I would get high with on Atlantic Avenue, and this one woman, Panama, she was like, baby, you need to stop doing this because you're gonna get hooked and you're gonna get this. And I'm like, girl, please. I was prom king. Like,
what are you talking about?
Crackheads? Like,
that's not me.
And this is actually even before I realized I was smoking crack. Like I didn't know for 3 months that I was smoking crack, and that's a whole nother issue. But, you know, and I was homeless in New York. I started there when I was in DC, homeless there, and then when I moved to New York, to LA, became homeless there. And at the time, I was working for this organization called Minority AIDS Project.
Okay.
So my job was awesome because I would go to bars and sex clubs and peers and whatnot, passing out condoms and literature on HIV and AIDS.
Right.
But those were great places for me because they had alcohol and they had some, you know, this and they had a little bit of that.
Right.
So I'd be getting sauce. And I was like, man, this is great. Here, condom.
Put on the condom. Drink.
You could get some loot.
Yeah, right.
You know, it was that kind of thing. And, oh, here's a pamphlet too, just you know,
just to be constant.
I got to get my quota. And my coworker's name is Michael Murley. Michael was sober at the time, and he had a car. I didn't have a car, but he would pick me up, and we would work together at these facilities and bathhouses or whatever. And I would be annihilated by the time he dropped me off back to the place I was staying. And there was this one particular time, and you know, I would get paid on Friday. And this is my ritual. I would get paid on Friday, a check. I didn't have a bank account, so I would have to go take it to the check cashing place in Hollywood and Cahuenga. I would make sure I got me some money orders because I knew if I didn't get these money orders, I was gonna mess up.
Right.
I go to the bar. I have 6 White Russians. I get on the bus and I go home, which was on 36 in Normandy. I would happen to fall asleep the stop before my stop, but happened to wake back up the stop after my stop, which happened to be where my crack dealer was. And I'm like, oh, well, since I'm here, I'll get a 20.
Right, exactly.
That 20 led into the entire week, sometimes into the week, and me running back to cash those money orders and coming home broke. And Michael one day, he dropped me off, and I was so messed up, and I literally fell out of his car. And he was like, and this is after my trip when my mother kicked me out of her house, actually. So this is when I came back to New York, because that was a whole nother story where I just devastated my mother. the people we hurt in our addiction.
Right.
Like the people we hurt. And, you know, the thing is, I'm just hurting myself. I'm just doing this to myself. But, you know, we're unaware because it is such a selfishness in addiction that there are peripheral people that are satellites, and there are people who genuinely care and love us, and we're annihilating them, trying to anesthetize ourselves. And, yeah, wow. So Michael was dropping me off, and he said, you know, Sage, if you keep drinking, you're gonna start smoking crack. And I was belligerent. I was like, how dare you? Because I hadn't smoked crack in like 2 weeks. I thought I was cured.
Right.
The reality was I just didn't have any money to do it at that time.
Right.
You know, I'm just getting back to New York because my mother put to LA because my mother kicked me out of New York.
Right.
And, like not just out of the house, but out of New York.
Go to the other side. Right.
And then, of course, the following Friday, I got the check. I did my ritual, and sure enough, I just devastated again. And it was a Sunday morning, early Sunday morning in that area, the Normandy and 36 near Exposition. And I'm coming off. I could smell myself. I'm cognizant of my stench, which means when you're aware of your stink, you stink.
Right.
You know, you real. You know, you
real
cross,
rank.
Yeah, you cross the line. Yeah. You know, perfume ain't gonna do it for you this time. And it's early Sunday morning, and people are walking to church, and they're dressed in their suits, and little girls in their dresses with the pigtails, and little boys with, you know, their suits on. And I'm looking down, walking north on Normandy, crossing Exposition. And as I'm stepping, I'm looking at my previous footsteps in the cement. And it dawned on me that I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm cashing the same money orders that I said I swore I wasn't going to cash. I threw away that crack pipe just to buy another one, to throw that one away just to buy another one. I reneged on every single promise of sobriety, every single what I'm not going to do. Every time I said I'm only going to spend 20, I ended up spending all of it.
Right.
Every time I said this is the last hit, a new hit comes. And I'm looking at the cement, and I'm like,
Here we go.
there we go. And I knew Michael was sober. And I remember I wrote this 3-page monologue. Because, you know, you have to be dramatic.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And I'm rehearsing this 3-page monologue of what he should do and how he should do it. And he needs to help me, and because I can't, blah, 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 blah. And it's this whole soliloquy. So I prepare myself, and I pick up the telephone, and I dial his number. The phone rings, and it rings again, and it rings again. And Michael answers the phone. He says, hello. And the only words from that 3 pages I could get out of my lips is help me.
My God, today.
It was help me. And I was, for the first time that I could remember, open enough. Like God had gave me a little sliver of the window.
Right.
Like he just cracked it. And that's all I needed. But I needed to be there to see the window.
Right.
Like I needed to be able to like look and say,
Get that.
ooh, there's some air coming from, it's just an inch, it's a quarter inch, it's a half an inch, and maybe I could squeeze under that.
Right.
I can't do this anymore. I'm looking at my footprints.
Right.
That's crazy. Like, it ain't never changed. You know, and everything I was looking for in that high never materialized. You know, that wild time, that good sex, that, you know, party, that, you know. And, you know, I couldn't even lose weight anymore from crack. I was big. I was like, this really stopped working.
Right. It's now time for me really to stop.
Like, this ain't working no more because, you know.
She ain't doing what she needed to do. So, I got it. Yeah.
But, you know, Michael, he didn't come over. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't pat me on my back and say, dear, dear. What he did do was say, okay, if you serious, if you want help, this is what I need you to do. He said, I need you to meet me at this church on Adams and Western at 6 p.m. on Friday. Now it's Sunday or Monday now. He said, just try. Just try not to drink or use between Monday and Friday. Now that's like asking someone, try not to breathe
Exactly.
for a week.
Exactly.
No, try not to brush your teeth. Try not to eat. Try not to defecate. Try not to pee for a week.
Try not to live.
Try not to live for a week. And when you've been doing this routine, as long as I have been doing this routine, it's my breath, it's my breathing, it's my air. So I had to figure out a new way to breathe from Monday to 6:30 at Friday. And like I said, I was arrogant in my disease. Friday gets here, I ain't drink, I ain't smoke crack. Tons of cigarettes, but I ain't smoke crack and I ain't drink.
Right.
And I meet him at this church, and I'm early, and I'm dressed because I had like my silk shirt on and my raw silk pants on or whatever I was wearing outfit, because I guess if I looked a certain way, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't see me as this broken person. And I go into this church, the basement of this church, and there's rows of chairs in the parking lots outside, and people have their car keys on their chair. They had their car keys on their chair. They was over there, but their chair was over there, and their car keys
was on it.
and their packs of cigarettes in their pocketbooks, and I'm like, ooh, these people, these people crazy. Like, ooh, they real crazy. They good. And the meeting started, and Michael came in and he greeted me, and I'm sitting there confused, damaged, broken, hurt, despondent, dystopic, all of it. And the people speaking about this, and they're doing this prayer and that hug and this thing over here, and I don't understand anything that's going on. But they have a part in this place in this meeting where they're welcoming people. And if you are new, come get this chip and hug.
That's not for me.
I'm just here to visit. You guys are.
This is your thing.
I'll save the chips because you need it. And then they go 30 days. There was a woman who stood up to get a 30-day chip, and she, by her appearance, could have been sleeping outside in the parking lot of that church. Tattered clothes, no teeth, hair undone.
Wow.
And she stood up and took a 30-day chip. And I'm sitting there like, holy shit. I'm sorry. I'm like, holy cow. This woman, you mean to tell me that woman ain't smoked crack in 30 days? I can't go a week. And she ain't smoking 30 days. What they doing? And that started the journey.
Wow.
I will never forget that woman's face. And she smiled. She smiled so big. Without a tooth in her mouth. Without a tooth in her mouth.
But still smile.
And, wow. Makeup. My mascara running. It was the first time I saw something called hope. And, like I said, I was stayed sober, was sober for, and very active in my sobriety, and I had learned how to shower on a regular basis. I learned how to get a job. I learned how to pay rent, and I'm still learning how to pay my credit card bills on time.
We all are.
Y'all get paid eventually, but right now I need some art supplies. Like,
I gotta do my
out of
thing.
sale,
Right.
Capital One. I'll get to you when I get to you.
Exactly.
You're still learning, you
Exactly.
still growing. I'm
Yeah.
still fallible and still have my things that I'm growing with. But that sobriety, I made friends, and I created a new reality for myself. But like I said, I wasn't creating. There was still that mustard seed of a hole in my spirit.
Right.
That malady had not gone away. I got stuff. I got my first Mercedes-Benz. No, first I had my first car. I loved that car. Her name was Billy. 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. She was the baddest thing. Billy would break down, but she wait till we get home.
She knew where to break down at.
She's like, "Oh, there's a mechanic right there. I can't go no further." And that was funny to me too, because even when I was a homeless crackhead, I still had a very good soul.
Right.
I had my foundation. Like I said, I was raised really well.
Right.
I was given a beautiful basement. Like, there were things like I knew I couldn't stand up with a cup in my hand. That was, I'm not to judge anyone who does that, but that wasn't where I could go.
Right.
I knew that I could never pop you upside your head to steal your pocketbook. Like, those were things I could not do.
Right.
So, the foundation of me has never altered.
Right.
The good parts of me have never diminished. Thank God. So, even with that Oldsmobile, it was funny how people reacted to that Oldsmobile juxtaposed when I got my first little compressor Mercedes thing, and they were like, "Ooh!" I was like, "Really?
Right.
So, but I wasn't creating, and after 11 years, my disease, like I said earlier, it speaks in whispers that become roars. It says, while I'm, at work, you're fat and ugly and no one loves you. You're valueless. You have nothing to offer anyone. That's why you're lonely.
Those negative thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're insidious. Like the disease. My disease is insidious. It tells me, it would be really fun right now. And you had 11 years of sobriety. Chuck,
Just go.
you could just do $10.
Just a little
It's just
bit.
a little bit. Just taste
Yeah.
it. You don't even know what it tastes like anymore.
Right.
And then, of course, you're back in a position where you're trying to commit suicide. And then you're back in a position where you're doing the most heinous and vile things to yourself and to the people who love you. Then you're back to drooling at the restaurant you work in front of a guest, trying to sell them another glass of wine, and not realizing you're drooling because, it was super important for me to take that hit in the bathroom before my shift started. Because I couldn't do this shift if I hadn't done that.
Right. Exactly.
And you lose all sense of self.
Right.
And again, that snowball that you thought you had melted,
Grew bigger.
it became an avalanche.
Exactly.
And you're like, where'd that come from?
Right.
Yeah, but it's summertime.
Oh, I didn't see that.
It's summertime.
Right.
Oh, and that's really where for me how it happened. The thing I think is this: understanding that I have a spiritual sickness. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a bad person. I'm a unwell person, and there is a path to wellness. I know what it feels like to pick out of a garbage can to eat. I know what it is to prostitute yourself. I know what it is to sleep in abandoned buildings where rats and roaches are crawling over your flesh. And all of that being said too, I'm so grateful for those experiences. My business partner and brother, John Bynes, it was in October 2017. I can tell you the date, October 17th, 2017. We were coming from a table reading of Jitney, which was fabulous. It was a great table reading.
So wait, what's Jitney?
Jitney is a play.
It's a play.
It's an August Wilson play. And a friend of mine who's an actor, I think Will is his name, invited me to this table reading. It was incredible. So,
awesome.
we're going out and talking and, I'm just rambling on about my life. And John, who's known me since the 80s, like 1988, he's just sitting there listening, counting. 1, 2, 3, 19. I say, what? 19 what? He said, Sage, I just counted 19 times in your talking where you should have been dead. Stabs here, stabs there, gunshot here, suicide attempt here, suicide attempt there. And, through all of that, I'm still here.
Right.
There's, as long as I'm on this side of the ground, I have an opportunity. If I get to see a new day, if I get to see a new sunrise, I get a opportunity. Now, whether I take advantage of that or not is entirely contingent upon how I'm going to see things.
So, wait a minute. Earlier you said that you didn't know that you were doing crack for 3 months. What did you think that you were smoking or?
So in that apartment in Brooklyn, and I had my vial of coke, and I'm not going to say the name, but D and J were standing in that doorway with that little aspirin bottle and offered it to me when I said, as long as it's not crack. We had experienced that night, and I remember not going back for a week or two to their home. And as I'm walking, it wasn't within walking distance in Crown Heights, and I got to their apartment and opened their gate, and I heard this voice in my head like, boy, Ron, baby, I need you to turn around right now and leave. And I dismiss the voice, I knock on the door. Boy, get out of here, run now, turn around, leave now. I finally relent because no one answered the door, so I walked out and I opened the gate, and as I'm closing the gate to leave, 2 heads stick out of the window and invite me back up. Their high was very different from my high, which made it uncomfortable. And again, I'm thinking I'm freebasing.
Right.
So D would take me to the drug dealer, so I knew where to go.
Right.
I met these homeless people who squatted in this abandoned building on Eastern Parkway, Panna and Anthony and their whole tribe. And it was an adventure to crawl through this little gated thing, mesh thing, into this vacant building with candles lit. It was adventurous to do that in my $1,100 lambskin leather coat. It was interesting.
Right.
Oh, this is new. And so those are the people I started hanging out with. So, and I still at that time had my job, so I had money.
Right.
And I remember after that 3 months, I had run out of my drug and they had run out of their drug. I had money, and I was like, here, just go get some more. Here's $20 for you guys, and then here's $20 for my stuff. I was like, I was very animate. I was like, make sure I have my freebase and not crack. And they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, just make sure you have, this is money for your stuff, and this is money for my stuff.
Right.
And Tony, I think the boy's name was, I was like, do you know what you're smoking? I was like, yeah, I'm freebasing. This is freebase. You guys smoke crack, I freebase. He was like, you've been smoking crack. And I lost my entire mind. I lost my entire mind. It was the sheerest and most, because the deception,
the hurt
of that. Right. Like I said, as long as it's not crack, I'll try anything. D and J were like, no! They had a leather couch. And black and white checkered china that matched, the rug and the couch. And, it was a 3-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. It was beautiful. And at that time, when I said, as long as it's not crack, I'll try anything, my perception of the crackhead was the person I would become a year to the day later. A year to the day later.
So let me ask you a question. So when you realized and you had that moment of clarity that you became the person that you despised, what was
more? I had already jumped off the ship. I didn't even know I was in the water. So it's now that I realize that it's wet, drown. Drown. Let's go then. Like, that was my approach. Like, I was so devastated by the realization that I wasn't doing what I thought I was doing, but something that I knew I would never do. And I'm already doing what I knew I'd never do.
So then, yeah.
It was, I had jumped off the ship, and I had just realized that, ooh, I can't swim. So just drown.
I'm just done.
Just done. And it just went all in, and that's when it just escalated to like the point where, like I said, you know, I'm working at Chemical Bank, smoking crack in the bathroom for hours, coming out looking like my eyes. I would leave work to go to Brooklyn, to go leave Wall Street to go to Brooklyn to go get high. And then if I'm talking about it's my lunch hour, because I was so in a state of delusion and denial and pain that the only thing that made sense to me was the most ridiculous. Like when crazy makes sense to you.
Right.
Something wrong.
Right. No, right. I get it.
Crazy? That makes it good. Yeah, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna leave my job. They're paying me right now. And I'm gonna go all the way to Brooklyn. And I'm gonna sit in the bathroom like this. And with a cigarette lick, because you know you can smoke.
Right,
that.
exactly.
And they don't think it's just cigarette smoke. And I'm saying to myself,
it is the greatest idea in the world, right? Like
perfect sense. Perfect sense.
You just solved world hunger with your
like it made perfect sense.
So, you know, I know that you've been through a lot. I want to know what life is like now.
My life is incredible right now, and it's incredible because of that. Those times, those experiences have murdered that bougie, stuck-up, snotty person who I once was, and taught me about empathy. It taught me about how to love people unconditionally. I've learned some of the most profound life lessons in crack houses. I've learned love and compassion from trans people in DC. I've learned the art of giving, the purity of giving in an abandoned building, when someone who had nothing offered me half of their sandwich. So my life right now is extraordinary, like bigger than anything I could have imagined. You know, when I posted my artwork from the Sober Living on Facebook, and in 2014 I sold my first painting. And I was just doing this like, oh, this is what I did today, and oh, by the way, this is the sandwich I ate today. It didn't, and since then, having exhibits and gallery shows, interviews, and showing my work at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, my first New York gala exhibit, producing my first album, Naked Under My Clothes, and then the book first, and then the CD, and then the films that we did, that I wrote and produced, that have affected people, and then selling my artwork that people are touched by, and to be of service, and being an advocate for the trans community, the LGBT community, the homeless community, because those are the people who saved my life. Right. And to be of service and to be productive at the same time, and to really trusting in the process of understanding I have a purpose. And that extends beyond my pain. That it's because of my experiences that I could. It's because of my experiences that I could do something like live on the streets with these homeless transgender kids in LA,
Right.
documenting their lives and having them be seen, or doing my Cracks series of this person who happened to smoke crack. And to show a different side of their humanity, to shoot the Matthews 2540, my homeless series. And not because, look, he's a crackhead, or they're a tranny, or this person's homeless, but because I knew how invisible I was in those spaces.
Right.
You know, and to be of service through my art, or to do a painting that someone is affected by or touched. And have that feeling, just walk into their home and to see that frame. It's just incredible to me. And to, like I said, to be able to create today. My life is amazing.
Absolutely. That's so awesome to hear. I'm so glad and honored to have you in my presence, friend. You know, just your story is just so much power. And you just bring me great comfort, and I appreciate
Thank
that. I just so appreciate you. The conversations that we had on the phone have been amazing. I love how you were open when we first talked, and how you share your journey with me. You know, if nobody told you today, you are amazing.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, you know, before we end our discussion, I want to show everybody what you blessed me with. This beautiful piece of artwork that is symbolic of me. It's almost like, well, I'll let you tell people what you said after we had our conversation.
Well, you know, after our conversation, it was obviously, it belonged to you. You know, I never walk up to a piece of, you know, to a canvas knowing what I'm going to paint. I always say that the artwork is done through me, not by me, and God is the artist. I'm the vessel, and at that point you become a part of the trilogy with becoming the collector. But it just, to me, for me, as an observer, it just represents someone who's, although he's been through so much, there's hope, and there's a quietness, but there's also a weatheredness about them, and a tenacity. An audacity to survive and to exist in spite of all the situations and circumstances that they've endured. And I think at the end of the day, it is just that. We've endured. We
Absolutely.
have endured and still stand and are able to give in return.
Absolutely. So if anybody is, you know, hearing us or watching this discussion and they want to look deeper into your body of work, how could they do that?
Well, you can go to my Sage Gallon, SAGEGALLON.com, my website. However, the best place is my Instagram page at Sage Gallon. Again, that's SAGEGALLON. I kind of produce a lot of stuff, and it's harder to update my website as it is to update my Instagram page.
Right.
So you can see the vast breadth of my work on Instagram and Facebook.
Absolutely. Thank you, friend. I enjoy my piece of art.
Okay, I'm happy. Thank you.